Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today I am going to discuss about the concept of security, integrity and recovery in DBMS. So integrity, security, recovery, how we are maintaining security in the database, how we are maintaining the consistency of the database in the database management system, and how we are going to recover if any transactions failure, if any data will loss in the database management system. So today we are going to conclude this topic, how we are applying security, integrity and recovery in the database management system. So look at the topic. The first one is security. So generally we are going to protect our data. We are going to protect our data from the database. So the security is term defines that the protecting the database from unauthorized access or alteration or deletion. So protecting the database from unauthorized access or alteration or deletion. Alteration is nothing but somebody's entered into the database, some user entered into the database and he has to modify according to his own purpose. So alteration is nothing but modification. So if he wants to modify the data, so he can do that modification. So that is nothing but alteration or deletion. So we are going to protecting the database from unauthorized access or unauthorized alterations or unauthorized deletions. These are all you can say that unauthorized actions. These are all we can say that unauthorized actions they can perform to accessing the database, they can perform to modify the database, they can perform to delete the database. So protecting our sensitive data from the database or protecting the database entire itself from unauthorized actions is called as security. And integrity. So integrity is nothing but it refers to the accuracy or validation of the data. Accuracy is nothing but maintainability of the data, whether it is a perfect data or it is a not perfect data. So whether it is a suitable data or not suitable data, whether it is related data or not related data. So that is nothing but integrity and validation of the data. So whether the data items are valid, whether the attributes are valid, whether the data terms valid or not. So all these things belongs to the validation of the data. So integrity refers to the accuracy maintaining in the database and the validation of the data maintained in the database. So integrity refers to the accuracy or validation of the data. Okay, but how some threats are occurring to entered into the database. So what are the threats? Threats to security and the integrity. So what are the threats? So before that, what is meant by threat actually we defined. So a threat is any situation. A threat is any situation or event or personal that will adversely affect the database security and the smooth and efficient functioning of the organization. So a threat is any attack or any situation or any event and it is any personal that will adversely affect the database security. So threat to the database may be intentional or accidental. So the threat will happen because of the intentional of the database user or someone's or itself accidental. So the threat to the database will affect with the help of intentional or accidental, right? So given below are some database security threats. So first one is the data tampering, second one is dropping and data theft, and the second one falsifying user identities, and fourth one is password related threats and unauthorized access to data, lack of accountability. So these are all some security threats. So data tampering means data alterations, data modifications. He wants to modify all the data from the database. So at that time they are going to intentionally disturb the data. They are going to modify the data. So that is data tampering. Eavesdropping and data theft. So he wants to take all the data from the user. Then he is performing this eavesdropping on data theft and falsifying users' identities. If anyone incidentally he wants to falsify the user's identity, he can able to alter the data and he can able to change, replace the data. It's not original. It is a duplicate or it is a falsifying data to lose their own identities, to lose their users' identities. And next, password related threats. So they are going to define different types of passwords. They are going to use different types of passwords, or they are going to apply some different types of passwords when the users are logging onto the database. At that moment, these fellows, these who are going to apply the security threat, these who are going to misuse that attack, so they are going to relate that password attacks. And unauthorized access to the data. So if anybody wants to access the data, particular college or particular university or particular company's data, he can use a different unauthorized access methods. He can use unauthorized access methods, and he wants to access the data. And lack of accountability. So lack of accountability is nothing but he is not having any ethical or ethical principles of the database or any ethical values of that database he wants to use. So that is itself, it shows that lack of accountability. And next, how to defense mechanisms. So when you are having the threats, security threats, how you are going to define on against the attacks, against the threats. So generally, we have 4 levels of defense are recognized for database security. And then first one is physical security, and then second one is human factors, and third one is operating system, and fourth one is the database system or database software itself. So you can have a strong defensive mechanism against physical security. So you can apply physical security with the help of some antivirus softwares or any physical machines or any other physical instruments. With the help of them, you can keep your system or data to be very secure. So you can protect yourself that data is not going to lose from your side. And human factors. So as we said, lack of accountability. The human having some ethical principles or moral principles against the database. So at that moment also we can define itself. And operating system. The basic thing is we are going to use different types of operating system. But whoever the operating system having the database security feature, that we can perform the database operations on that operating system, so that the data is not going to theft by any others. So we can defensive itself by maintaining that secure operating system. And next one, database software or database system. So different types of database softwares are there: Oracle, MySQL, DB2, like the different types of database softwares. But indirectly, they are providing database security or not. We can check it and we can install that database softwares, so that we can defend against these all the tampering attacks or security threats from the database. Right. The next, what are the data security requirements? So to maintain that security on the data in the database system, we have some requirements. We have to follow that requirements. So the basic security standards which technologies can assure that, the first one is what? Confidentiality. So in that confidentiality, that means we have a strong confidential on that operating system or software or any other physical instrument or anything. We have to must assure that we have very confidential about that. So the first one is what? Access control. So access to data is controlled by means of privileges. That means permissions and roles. Whoever the system administrators or system users or user accounts. So access control, you can give the limited access to the limited users. By providing limited access to the limited users, you can maintain that access control mechanism. And applying the permissions to the users also. Some of the permissions are denied to the users. Some of the permissions are applied to the user. So that whoever having the permissions to access the data, these people only access the data. Otherwise, all the persons cannot identify. All the persons cannot access the data. Authenticated users. So authentication is a way of implementing decisions of whom to trust. So authentication is a way of implementing decisions of whom to trust. It can be employ a passwords, fingerprints, and everything. So whoever having the authentication to access the data, only the people can access that database. So that means providing biometrics, providing passwords, providing some logins, so that the users can have the role of authenticated users. And third one, secure storage of sensitive data. So secure storage, that means you can have a different types of storage devices. So all the devices may not have any security, may not have a strong security, but we have to maintain that strong security because of the strong storage devices. Because of strong storage devices we can maintain the data is to be very sensitive, very securable. So it is required to prevent data from hackers who could damage the sensitive data. Some of the hardware devices are broken very easily. Some of the hardware devices may not be broken very easily. So that all the supported security storage devices, we have to keep it. And then next, privacy of communication. The database management system should be capable of controlling the spread of confidential personal information from unauthorized people such as credit cards, etc. So distributing your communication, distributing your information is very theft. It is a very theft. So we have to maintain the privacy of communication from unauthorized users. So from unauthorized users, we have to maintain the privacy of our data or database system. So these are all some database security requirements. And integrity. So integrity is nothing but, we already said that, maintaining the accuracy of the data and validation of the data. Accuracy or validation, the consistency of the data. So integrity contributes to maintaining a secure database by preventing the data from becoming invalid and giving misleading results. So we are aware of that giving a misinformation or misleading result. So we have to maintain that the data is to be very useful or not, very valid data or not. So that maintains that integrity of the data. So it consists of the following aspects. So first one is what? System and object privileges control access to application tables and system commands, so that only authorized users can change the data. So we have to maintain the privileges on system, on tables, or on object of any database, and accessing of that all the objects. So we have to keep all the permissions, we have to keep all the privileges to access that particular system, to access that particular object, to access that particular application tables from the database. And second one, integrity constraints are applied to maintain the correctness and validity of the data in the database. So integrity constraints, some conditions or rules we have to apply. So integrity constraints are applied to maintain the correctness. So we have to recheck each and every data item, whether it is validated or not, whether it is having conditions or not, whether it is trustable or not. We have to recheck each and every one and maintain the correctness and validity of the data in the database. And the next, database must be protected from viruses. This is very, very important. Database must be protected from viruses. Different types of viruses are attacked and entered into the system. Those are all try to enter into the database also. So we have to keep our database is to be very secureable, so that all the viruses are not supposed to enter into the database system. So for that, what we have to do, we can install firewalls and antivirus softwares also. Firewalls and antiviruses should be used. Firewalls and antiviruses should be used. Ensure that access to the network is also we have to control. So giving the permissions to access all the network is also very dangerous, because some of the untrusted users can enter into the network. They can access all the network and they can access all the data itself only. So access to the network is controlled and the data is not vulnerable to attacks during transmission across network. So whoever trying to enter into the network, they are going to disturb the network. They are going to interrupt the network also. So that what will happen? The entire network is going to be disrupted and the data is also disrupted. So that we have to maintain that some permissions or maintain the privacy of privacy of providing the passwords also. So by maintaining all these permissions or protecting mechanisms or validations of the data, we are going to maintain that integrity of the data. So that itself it identifies that accuracy and validation of the data. And next, availability. The data should always be made available for unauthorized users by the secure system without any delays. So whoever having the authorized users, whoever having the authentications, they must have that access the data. They must have the permission to access the data, so that the data is available to all authorized users. And availability is often thought of as a continuity of service, assuring that database is available. So providing the service to that accessed users or authenticated users is also one of the availability service. And denial of service attacks or attempts to block authorized users' ability to access and use the system when I needed. So it has a number of aspects. So denial of service attacks, DOS attacks, we can say that DOS attacks. These attacks are attempted to block authorized users. These attacks are tampered from internet network, and they are trying to block authorized users their ability to access and use the system when they need it. So it has the number of aspects. So first one is what? Ease of use. So resources managed by users for working with the database should be effectively managed so that it is available all the time to varied users. So they can have all the services, to access the database at any of the time. And flexibility. So administrators must have all the relevant tools for managing user population. So the flexibility providing by the administrators, they must have all the relevant tools for managing user populations. And next is scalability. So the scalability, system performance should not get affected by the increasing in number of users. So whenever the number of users are trying to access the database, it should not get any affected. So that it means it maintains the data is to be available for all the users, available or scalable for all the users, and process which requires service for the system. So all the users, whoever having the database authentications, they must have the service to access the data at any time. So that is nothing but scalability of the data. And next one, resistance. So user profiles must be defined, and the resource used by any user should be limited. And resistance is nothing but the users have some limitations to access all the data. So by providing some permissions or by providing some limitations, the user is going to restricted for accessing the particular databases. This is called as availability of the things. And important security features. So how we are maintaining the security, some of the important security features. In the first one is views. We can create views to providing the security for the tables. By providing the security for the tables, instead of using the tables, we can use views also. So regarding that views concept, we already discussed in the previous sessions. So views are virtual tables. We already said that, and the views we are providing a security for the tables. So even if you want to modify anything, you can modify in the view. If you can last, we can have the table as a backup. So that backup will give additional information if anybody requires. And second one is what? Authorizations and controls. So authorization is nothing but giving the permissions, giving the privilegizations to the user. Whoever having the privilegization, whoever having the authentications, they can have the authorization to access the data. And the controls. So some of the users can have the privileges to access the particular database, and some of the users may not have the particular privileges to access the database. So accessing the database by giving the permissions allow or deny, they can have the controls. And user defined procedures or privileges. So user also going to define some procedures and some permissions also. And encryption procedures. So data conversion procedures or encryption procedures also one of the security feature to deliver the data into the destination very securely, very securely. So here, authorization is a process of permitting users. Authorization is a process of permitting users to perform certain operations on certain data objects. So some certain data objects are nothing but we can say that all views, functions, procedures, and everything. So all these are called as data objects. Certain data objects in a shared database. So authorization is a process of permitting the users to perform certain operations on certain database objects. For example, let us consider the authorization that a salesperson undertakes. So the salesperson is a one person whoever having the permissions to access the customer records or order records. We will see. So here the salesperson can read customer records. Yes, they can have the permission to read the customer records, and the salesperson also having the permissions to read order records also. And salesperson inserting some customer records. Yes, he can have the permission to insert records, and he can have the permission to insert order records also. And the salesperson can have the permission to modify the data. Yes, but a salesperson cannot have the modify the order records. No, so he cannot modify the order records. He can modify the customer records, but he cannot modify the order records. Similarly, delete. The salesperson can delete the customer records. No, and the salesperson can delete the order records also. No. So that we are saying that from this table, the salesperson having some permissions to read and insert and modify. Read and insert and modify. Read and insert and modify. And he cannot have the permission to delete customer records and order records also. So from this table, we say that where N stands for no and Y stands for yes to authorization of a salesperson. So the salesperson, not only the salesperson, in real-time examples also, the D-marts or Reliance marts and everywhere, they can, the only salesmen having to sell that item and having that read that item, but they don't have to delete or destroy that item, or they don't have permission to destroy that customer data also, right? To explain the concept of view, let us consider the example of bank clerk who needs to know the names of customers of each branch but is not authorized to specific loan information. So while considering a view, we already said that a view is one security feature. So in that view, what we are saying that here the bank manager can see all the other branches customers data, but he does not have a permission to see specific loan information. So how can we define that view? Means here create view customer loan as select a branch name comma customer name from borrower comma loan. These two are the tables where borrower dot loan number equals to loan dot loan underscore number. So that means we are creating a view as customer underscore loan and the branch name customer name are the columns from borrower and loan. These two are the tables. So based on these two tables, branch name and customer names I want to display in the view. The view name is customer underscore loan. So here, since the clerk is authorized to see this view, so clerk can execute a query to see the result. Select a star from customer loan. So now what he can see the branch name and the customer name from these two tables. So when the query processor translate the result into a query on actual base table in the database, we obtain a query on borrower and loan tables. So borrower and loan are the two tables. So this permission must be checked on clerk's query processor begins. So these two will happen when the query processor started to run this query query processor started to run this query. So this is the basic view how we are going to provide the security feature on the particular database object. Next one, database integrity. So how we are applying the integrity in the different types of perspectives. So integrity is nothing but we can have the permissions, we can have the accuracy of the data. So how we are going to apply the constraints or integrity constraints. So we'll see. So constraints, there are three ways we are having the constraints. So one is business constraints, second one is entity constraints, and third one is referential constraints. First one is business constraints, second one is entity constraints, and third one is referential constraints. So business constraints are nothing but a value in one column may be constrained by value of some another or by some calculation or formula. So that means the business constraints are applied to the values based on other value or based on any other formula or calculations. So the value generated by the value generated for the data by using some formulations or by using some other data. So based on that other data or based on that calculation or formulations, the conditions are applied to the business columns. And second one, entity constraints. Entity constraints. So individual columns of a table may be constraints. Example, not nine. So entity constraints. So entities are nothing but a real world object. So contain a student is an entity, college is an entity. So that college or student can have a different types of constraints. Not null constraints, primary key constraints, unique constraints, check constraints, different types of constraints are available. So you can provide all the constraints on the particular columns in the table. So by providing that constraints on the columns, so you can restrict it to enter the particular data or not. Right? This is the entity constraints. And third one, referential constraints, sometimes referred to as key constraints. So key constraints also we can say that. So primary key or foreign key constraints, they can have that referential constraints. So example, table 2 depends upon table 1. So the first one customer table and second one is order table. If we are taking customers under order table, if you want to display the result for the customer table or order table, that one table result is depending upon another table. So that those two columns, those two tables columns having a key relationship between two tables. Those two columns having the key relationship between two tables. So that is nothing but referential constraints. And the benefits of using that constraints. So what are the benefits are provided to using that constraints? So first one is what? Guaranteed integrity and consistency. Guaranteed integrity and consistency. So by maintaining that constraints, we can say that that column is limited to enter this value only. That column is limited to permit this number of values only. So that we are maintaining the integrity or consistency. And defined as a part of table definition. Defined as a part of table definition. So as a part of table definition, how many columns you want to add, how many attributes you want to add, so that all the columns will be added or defined. And applies across all applications. Applies across all applications. So all the applications having the different types of database constraints. So that applying constraints to that particular attributes is maintaining that applications to be very secure. And cannot be circumvented. Cannot be circumvented. That means they are not going to circulate it for any other databases purpose. They can have they can have the permission is to be particular column or not. And application development and productivity. Application development and productivity also will implement by using these constraints and requires no special programming also. So to implementing the constraints, there is no need to apply a special programming. No need to write any special programming also. And easy to specify and maintain. So easy to specify and maintain the tables and maintain the database objects also. And defined once you have defined the constraints and you are not going to use for any other purpose. You can use for particular column and particular attribute purpose. You can permit to enter any values. Permit to enter any values or limited values. So these are the benefits of using constraints. And three main integrity problems are. So what are the main integrity problems? Okay, benefits we are know, but integrity problems. So when we are having the last updates means due to the power failures or due to the some unreasons, they are going to lose the data. So at the time when we are lost our updates, so if your data is not committed, then we may lose the data, we may lose the update also. And inconsistent retrieval. So inconsistent retrieval means we are not going to retrieve the particular data particular point of time, so that is nothing but inconsistent retrieval. And database recover. So database recovery is nothing but the process of restoring the database to a correct state in the case of failure. So if any due to different problems the data may be lost, so we want to restore the database. So the process of restoring database to a correct state in the case of failure, so that is called as database recovery. Nowadays we can have different types of softwares to recover all the data. So we can have recovery software from the online, and by installing that all the recovery softwares also we can recover the data. Some of the recovery data will supported up to last year or last 6 months only. They are having some timing constraints only, and the problems will occur with the help of system crashes. The data is going to be lost because of system crashes, media failures, application software errors, and natural physical disasters, and carelessness. These are all some uh, reasons or things to lose our data. So system crashes, if you are not maintaining the systems to be very careful, or very not using any good softwares or not using any good operating system, your system automatically crashes. So media failures, your hard disk or your media supported devices are also not suitable, then it is going to be failures. And application software alerts, some of the softwares are having some bugs, so that errors are also supported to lose your data. Natural physical disasters, so due to the rain effects or weather effects, some of the places will not support it to encourage the database. So at that time moment also the data is going to be lost. And carelessness, if you are not having any discipline or carefulness on that maintaining the database, so definitely you are losing your data. So these are all the database loss things, database losing causes, and the recovery process, this one. And basic recovery concepts. So how you are going to recover your data, in what cases you are going to recover counts. So first one is backup mechanism. So it makes periodic backup copies for the database. So definitely you are going to take a backup for every 1 hour or every day itself. So all the large companies are going to maintain the data backup for every 1 hour, so that they are going to recover or restore the data whenever they want. And the second one is logging concept. So this keeps the track of current state of transactions by maintaining that logs. By maintaining the logs also, they are currently they are having transactions and the changes made in the database. So by maintaining the logs also, they can update the database if they want. And a checkpoint mechanism. So this enables update to be made permanent. So when you are using checkpoints, for that moment only, if you are losing any data, you can recover it. Or restore it. So that enables update to made permanent recovery of the database. So these are all the basic recovery concepts. So in this session, we discussed about that all the security, integrity, and database recovery. So security purpose, security features, and what are the threats to the security and the integrity, and some of the security threats, how you are going to have that security threats, and how you are going to defend against that attacks, defensive mechanisms, the security requirements, confidentiality, access control, authenticated users, secure storage of sensitive data, privacy of communications. These are all some data security requirements. And the integrity, so what are the aspects to maintain that integrity on the database, and the availability of the database, and the security features of the data, So views, authorizations and controls and everything, and the database integrity. So constraints, what are the constraints? Business constraints, entity constraints, referential constraints. So and benefits of using constraints, and main integrity problems. So when we are lost our data, when we are not committed, when you are not having inconsistent retrieval, so that, and the what is meant by recovery and how you are going to have the recovery concept. These are all the things we have discussed in this session. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.